right. Good morning on the West Coast and Central Mountain on the East Coast. Good afternoon. Hopefully, everybody's having a great day. It's been a month since we last checked in. I'm really excited to dig into this um, month's LinkedIn Live because we want to provide some resources, tools, something to think about in preparation for all the tough work folks are going to do to really end the school year on a strong note. I know it's kind of early to think about ending the school year, but with assessments coming up, hiring, everything that's going to come up in February, March, April, thinking about what we're going to do in the second half of the year to ensure that students are set up for success, teachers are set up for success, leaders are set up for success is extremely important. So hopefully the tools that we provide today will help you with that. And me, I'm in California. Jill's in New Orleans. She's in her car today. That's the beauty of being able to work virtually. And I think you might be frozen, Jill, but I think we're good now. Well, going back in and out, but I'm going to start by kicking it off with our presentation for today, prepping for a student data step back. And let me know, Jill, I think you might be frozen in the meanwhile. Coming back in. Jill, you with us? You got us?
Yeah, sorry about that, y'all.
All good, all good. Yeah, we was rolling. You had a crazy look on your face for a minute. Can't edit that one out because we're live, but we'll go in. So Jill, I'm just gonna kick it to you so we could talk about our framework and the energy we're specifically going to focus in on today.
Great, and I will try to be conscious of my facial expressions, as y'all can. Maybe you can tell, maybe you can't. I am doing this live from the road, so fingers crossed on my connectivity. But in case my face freezes again, I'll try to hold a normal expression. If you've done work with us in the past, you may be familiar with our Echelon bird framework. We frame our work together, Anwar and I, under 5 main bird energies. And each time that we engage in the work, we like to frame it within the energy and the wisdom of the bird. Looking at data, I want you all just to take this slide in for the next 20 seconds and really look at both the wisdom under the eagle eye and the role and the energy of the eagle on the team. And as you're taking the slide in and reading the bullet points, 2 things that I like to call attention to that sometimes leaders forget that is really important and good energy to bring through as you're looking at data are bullet points numbers 3 and 4 in the eagle eye. Meaning using data, don't forget or keep top of mind. It's your job to grow and support the eaglets to maturity. And that's both your students and their data and growing your teachers to maturity and independence on analyzing their data and making the instructional decisions with their data. And many of you all that I've been working with have said this process has taken longer, this process of growing your teachers in analysis, in strong analysis and in strong reteach decision making. And it's taking longer and it seems to be more tedious than it was, say, 5 or even 10 years ago. So don't forget that, keep it top of mind in order for your whole team to be able to analyze data and make strong reteach decisions. The ability for you to inspire and grow the teachers and the students around data is extremely important. And the last bullet point, connecting to the sky or greatest purpose in the universe. And it's connecting this data that you now have, this halfway through the year data, connect it to your larger vision for the growth and the proficiency you expected this year, and connect it to your 3 and your 5-year plan. That's one of the ways that can be really helpful to help people keep levity as you're going through the data at this point in the year. And then directly, as it says on the team, you can see the vision and you inspire, which we're going to give you some techniques to use. And then also seeing the bigger picture and knowing what your team needs from you as you engage in this analysis and decision on reteach. Anything else you would add on that one, Anwar?
No, I think you covered a lot of it. The only thing I was thinking as you were speaking was how different teams are coming in at different places. So there's so many so many different things that you want to inspire amongst your staff, amongst your students. But depending on where the school is at, being critical on what are those parts that you want to focus on for this upcoming school year. Maybe you're like, hey, we just opened and we're really focused on doing what's necessary to ensure that we have teachers in the building in the upcoming year. That might look different than a school that is established 5 years, multiple teachers that have a lot of experience at the school. That might look a little bit different. So just thinking of your situation, what's the most important for you as a school leader and as a school is important as you continue to have that eagle eye.
Yeah, agree completely. Heading into the first of two tools that I'll share with you, I think in the larger picture of 4 tools total that we'll share in this LinkedIn Live. We're going to dive into some techniques for inspiration and then some techniques for data internalization. So good with next slide. The visual on the left, most folks have heard of and are aware of IQ. Most folks in leadership training are now aware of EQ, which really came out, I mean, earlier than this, but I really started to directly infuse it in my work around 2013, 2014. And then some folks are aware of the PQ and the AQ. This visual is from Gary Colton. He published it in 2016 in a LinkedIn article. So if you want to read more about him, about the visual, the AQ, the PQ, the EQ, and the IQ, you can feel free to look up Gary Colton's work on LinkedIn. And it's based heavily in some of Daniel Goleman's work, as well as some stuff that I used to use from Cambridge Leadership. But in your Inspire, it's important to realize that as humans, we will connect with speakers and with leaders in the mental, which is the first visual on the right, in the mental, in the brain. If someone is saying something that we mentally agree with or it's intellectually stimulating, we will make that connection with them on the brain level. If someone is speaking from their heart or potentially sharing something that is heavily authentic and involves a lot of feelings, we can connect with them in the heart. And it's interesting, in a heart-based connection, and in work that we do in Impact Cohort, we explore what is it that allows us to connect with our heart. But just knowing for today's purposes, a heart-based connection can happen. It happens in the field of feelings. And what's interesting about the heart-based connection, the field of feelings, is I could be feeling something authentically, such as happy, and you can connect with me in the field of feelings. You don't have to be feeling happy. You just have to be authentically feeling whatever you're feeling. And then that cohesion would happen on that field so that that connection can happen on the heart-based connection, which is another way when we're inspired by people, we're connected sometimes in the mind, sometimes in the heart. And then that last visual is that gut-based connection. And so that is, again, a place where when I'm deeply committed to my work and I'm connected to it from sort of the gut, physical, visceral level, other people can connect with me as the leader from the gut, visceral, physical level. And they do not have to be feeling the same gut feeling that I'm feeling. So it's just a quick rundown. If you want to learn more about it, definitely reach out. I love doing self-awareness work around sort of the connections we can make when we're individually with folks and in a large group with folks. And if you are responsible for running data reviews, data meetings, or some sort of, what would you call it, kind of coming back from your winter break, larger PD, it's interesting for you to do a little moment to say, where do I naturally connect with people? Is it only in the head? Or am I trying to connect more with the heart and with the gut? And ultimately, there will be more cohesion in the field when you make connections with people in the heart and the gut. And when there's cohesion in the field, it also becomes easier then for your mental to kick online and the actual learning, data analysis, et cetera, to take place. Questions on anything I covered, anybody can drop them in the chat, or Anwar, anything you might want to add around connecting with your team.
Nothing to add, but just a lot of reflecting and thinking about my practice and the importance of like that. IQ is important, but as you mentioned, the PQ and the EQ, if that's not there, it's the cohesion that's going to happen within the team and the ability to just move in the right direction for good, positive results for students is limited a bit, just in my experience. So to hear you give it terms and connect it to things I've done in the past was pretty solid on my end. So nothing to add, but just definitely, I guess what folks do to match brain match or all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yep. And so if you have any questions about what I'm saying, you're like, oh, I get this. I want to make more of a heart-based connection when I review data. Definitely reach out. I love doing this type of work with folks. Ready, there it is. So one of the tools that I use with leaders is this STEPBACK planning tool for anytime a team member is going to get in front of, or anytime a leader is going to get in front of a team. And we use this tool in several ways. One, for some people, they'll have this tool and then they'll sit down to do their prep work and align it directly to this tool before and align both their PowerPoints, their worksheets, etc., making sure that they have everything covered within this tool. Another way that people work and the way that I personally work is my ideas kind of come to me first in terms of visuals and slides. So I'll work first and do all my slides. Then I'll kind of put my worksheet together, go back and forth between my worksheet and my slides. And when I think I'm about 80 to 90% done my presentation, I'll pull this up and just go through and check to make sure I have all components. Now, we asked you guys to bring in the eagle energy in the beginning, so I want to hone in around the inspire. The question as a leader that we ask ourselves is, how are we going to build emotion and cohesion into this session? And the 4 bullet points that you see, and there's a 5th with other, but the 4 bullet points you see, I use to guide potential openings for all PD and data sessions. And I would say in reflection, the strongest data, the strongest inspires in data sessions really have happened with bullet points numbers 2 or 4. So ask team to reflect on a time, situation, person, when or who, or giving the team a problem to solve, a prompt to journal, etc. So the data sessions that I've seen opened using one of those 2 are usually the strongest for getting the heart and gut-based connection in, and then helping people to just kind of make a connection in as a team of that's going to move forward to then analyze and determine reteach plans and data. The example I want to share here, because for some of you I was like, oh, this makes sense. And for other people, you might be like, wait, this I'm not understanding it yet. And the best example, Amy Dondero, giving you a shout out. She was a math coach at Intrepid in Nashville. And Intrepid recently just won Tennessee Charter School of the Year. So shout out to Lizzie and Christina doing the good work down at Intrepid. But when Amy was the math coach down at Intrepid, around January, they got back their mid-year interim assessments. It was a 6th through 8th grade, 5th through 8th grade, I believe at the time. And she had the math team in front of her, and all of the grade levels saw a decrease from first semester interim to first marking period interim to second marking period interim. And she brought the team together, and you could just feel the room was defeated and wiped out. And she took this energy, let it live, and she wiped it out in under 5 minutes. And what she did was masterful. She said, I want everyone to look at this data and select one word. You have she gave them 30 seconds, select one word that describes how you're feeling. And she gave them the 1 minute, and she said, I'll go first. And I believe her word was frustrated. And the next person went and they said angry. Another person said confused. I love y'all math people. Confused is not an emotion, but we let that live there because right under confused is the emotion. So those of us that don't jump into our emotions so well, we'll name confused and we'll let you sit there because the emotion's right under there. Another person said disheartened. sad and we had a defeated. She got back to herself and she named 3 key things that she had been doing. She said, and she validated the feelings. So she said, I absolutely agree with the disheartened. All of us were here putting in the work, showing up every day. I agree with frustrated. We thought we had addressed these gaps coming out of the first marking period, and we haven't. And I can hear confused, and hopefully today we will break through that. And just like that, the energy left the room, and she could then ask the next question to get them at analysis. But had she started with analysis and not given a space for confused, frustrated, disheartened to clear out, there's no way that she would have gotten done what she got done in the next 40 minutes, which was very clear analysis. Her strong teachers had their reteach plan, and she knew who she needed to follow up with to get stronger reteach plans. So that's just my shout out to Intrepid, to Amy, and to the folks that say, hey, I can't bring emotion into this slides. Trust me, data is probably the place where there's some of the most human feelings living, and we want to find a way as leaders to use those feelings to move our team forward. Questions on anything, Anwar, or anything you would highlight from that?
No, I just think in the anecdote that you shared, the biggest piece for me was giving folks the space to express how they feel. But then, okay, cool. Now let's move on to what we're gonna do because we have that same motivation. If we're feeling this where we're motivated, so let's use that same motivation to improve the results. And clearly, where they're at as a school, I'm sure they were able to turn it around and
Yep.
make it be more positive.
Yeah, but just saying, like, again, it's being really honest about how you're feeling, not getting stuck in it, letting it live, and just, letting that energy shift, giving it a place to live, validating it, and moving it through was really just powerful to see. Next slide is just a blank copy, so we'll let that show for a second. If you like that, just screenshot it, and you can begin to work your inspires from for your data day from the previous that has all of the guiding questions. Next slide, please, Anwar. And just some tips. Let the data talk. That means when your team knows how to analyze, your job is to probe them. Specific probes. If you need examples of that, please reach out to me individually, because that is probes that I would use would be individual based on the type of data that you're using. And your team make me, so using different response mechanisms like thumb up if I thought, or if my students performed the way that I thought they would. And thumb to the side if I'm surprised, thumb down if I was, if students performed not as well as I thought they would. So using those nonverbals where everybody has to respond and make a commitment really helps to increase cohesion and engagement and individual connection with the actual data. Use turn and talks for self-awareness as well as for the analysis type questions. Turn and talks are super helpful, and it allows your people that aren't familiar yet to kind of get some level of comfortability before they have to share out whole group. And I gave you guys a great example of less is more, especially when you're trying to get to analysis, but less is more. So one word to say how you're feeling, one word to name, how you are interacting with how kids performed. So just some different tips there around how to help people make more than just a mental connection with their data. Those are my quick reminders and tips. Anwar, I don't know if you have anything else on those. Otherwise, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I think the big one for me that I like that you highlighted in the anecdote and on these tips is the one word piece. Because with data, emotions are high, folks have put in a lot of work. There couldn't be opportunities for folks to talk, do more talking and less doing. So I like the response mechanisms are quick. You have nonverbal, turn and talk, you can bring it back. And then that one word piece I think is real strong. And then also for Let the Data Talk, one a former supervisor at Explore Schools, Christina Frobe, she one of the things she mentioned my first year was around data being a mirror and a window. And I think when you let the data talk, it's not only a mirror to reflect on yourself, but also a window for what students are doing. And I try to use that a lot when speaking about data. So thank you so much, Jill, for that. I'm going to go through a couple of resources that I have here, and I'm going to be straightforward. Like the resources that I'm going to share, none of them are things that schools don't have, but there are a couple of small pieces in the resources that I want to highlight to keep in mind as we're going in this stage where we're looking for continuous improvement. So to start, just want to give some big general best practices when thinking about continuous improvement as you go into this next part of the year, because a lot of the stuff that students are going to do on assessments and what they show is something that if you're at a charter, you're bringing to your authorizers. If you're at a district school, you're doing this to show your superintendent that your school is making progress, etc. But at the whole school level, one, just want to be sure to establish, share, or reshare end of the year and termly benchmarks. Folks need to know what direction they're going. If they know what direction they're going, it'll be much easier to make those small changes along the way to ensure that students are set up for success. So if your goal was 10 percentage point increase on in a specific exam, make sure you establish, share, reshare that goal. If your goal is after every 8 weeks, students make a 5% gain, or you're decreasing the bottom half by 30%, whatever that goal is, make sure you share it with folks so folks are very well aware of it. Every teacher should know what the school goal is, whether you're a math and ELA teacher who are directly connected to it, or even the art teacher, because it's a whole school process. Then, when looking at leaders, just recommend leaders at this point in the year when you see most folks have probably done a middle of the year assessment. You've already looked at that data, but develop an action plan to meet those benchmarks. We have this data. What are we going to do with it, right? If you could look at it all day and go over spreadsheets, but if you don't have an action plan on how to actually change the trajectory of the data, it's going to be tough. And at this point of the year, because the tests are coming, you know, April, May, to get a sense on where students are at and be able to still have time to improve how students are doing, I just recommend having an 8 week action plan to really um, solidify what students are doing in the classroom. Next, for leaders, you want to identify those push or cuss students. Who are those students that you can really move? Because when you're going into classrooms, you can, in your observations, you could see how those students are doing, how teachers are interacting with those particular students. But you want to determine those students ahead of time. And also, teachers would want to determine them as well. But you need to have a grasp on who those students are as well as a coach. If necessary, depending on where your school is at, you might need to revise some structures. Maybe that you're at a point where the culture is solid. We can have some more small groups in our classes, or for example, I need the culture person to push into these particular classes because these classes need some support. So this is the time to revive, if necessary, some of the structures you have. Identify priority learning outcomes. Depending on what you're preparing students for, there might be certain standards that you want to prioritize ahead of others. Knowing those ahead of time and being able to share that with teachers will be really helpful as they're adjusting your instruction along the way. And lastly, at the end of those 8 weeks, if possible, have an interim assessment. It might not be the end of the year, but just some assessment to see if I did an action plan, if I've been looking at these push students, if I've revised some current structures, what impact did it have on student learning? So the last piece I want to touch on is also with development. So we have whole school, what leaders should be doing, and how are we developing teachers? So this is something that I'm a very big proponent of. We've spoken about it before in different LinkedIn lives. I've spoken it in a lot of PDs that I've done, but just consistent looking at student work protocols. If it hasn't been happening for the first part of the school year, this is the time to really see what are students doing, right? What are they showing? What type of knowledge are they showing, or what are they showing that they're getting from the instruction that they're receiving? And I would say weekly, but at least bi-weekly, coaches sitting down with teachers, if you have the structure possible, sitting down with coaches, sitting down in PLCs, looking at student work and making plans to adjust their instruction in class. Hopefully at this point, the internalization process is real solid, so you can focus on looking at student work. Then the second piece is walkthrough rubrics. Is leaders potentially have a walkthrough rubric that can focus on some of the things within the action plan. And then for leaders, you see that I mentioned that interim assessment at the end of those 8 weeks. You want a strong data day to determine what are those small shifts we're going to make in March and April to ensure that our students are ready on those very high stakes exams towards the end of the year. We don't want to teach to the test, but the reality is that a lot of our, as leaders, what we're judged on are our students' performance on high stakes exams, right? Everything that student does isn't the results of them getting an A and B in class, but then when they move on from your school, that's what they have to show what they've done at your school. So you want to prep students to be the best in class, and at the same time, you want to prep teachers to make sure students are doing well on the high stakes exam. So wanted to point out that piece around continuous improvement. Jill, anything that you wanted to touch on that I might have skipped over you want to add in?
Nothing that you skipped over, but just this slide in general for leaders. I think it's great. Anwar did a great job breaking down each point in the slide. And this is a great slide just to keep up and do a self-analysis. Check mark if you think each of these buckets is currently strong, or circle the areas that you might need to develop yourself or get some support developing. But if you have all of these things happening, then you have a great environment set up for data-driven instruction to occur. But if you are missing any of these key bullet points, it's going to be hard to drive forward with data-driven decision making and reteaching in a way that everyone on your team feels well prepared to do so. So great, very rich slide. Pause it, check mark you have these things, circle you need some growth. You either can do it yourself or you might need to get some support. Super rich slide. So just want to call that out.
So just quickly want to share a couple resources that I have. Again, everyone has data analysis templates, but this one here is nothing. We worked with, I worked with a school, Ivy Hill Prep, last year on their math data and just improving the math results of their school. And the one part that I do want to share is the small group planning at the end. So as you're doing your data reflection, you want to ensure that teachers are very aware of which students are receiving interventions, which students are receiving small group instruction, and then as they're looking at the data, how did those interventions impact students, right? How did that small group impact students? Because at times we can say, oh, they're in small group, they're automatically going to do better. You don't know that. I've seen small groups happen and the kids wanted to leave the group or they would get in trouble, all kinds of, we all got stories from schools. But you do want teachers to take a moment. If they're putting all that effort into interventions in SGI, what is the result of that? Because you might need to change up what's happening in those sessions. You might, and some students might be progressing. You might need to revise that session. You might need to switch up. So many moving parts at this time of the year in those high dosage instructional blocks within the classroom or during intervention blocks. You want to be able to be nimble with those and adjust those real time. And I really like how we were able to together to come up with this plan where we're looking at revising CUS students and SGI students. And then also thinking about small group planning, right? It's just not, oh, we're going to go in a small group, we're going to redo the work. No, what actually are you doing within that small group session to improve student achievement? Because it can real easily turn, a small group session can easily become a homework check or busy work time, but really being focused on maximizing that time. And the second one, because we're running up on time, but this is revised some of the resource that I got from Explore Schools. And if you're thinking around, all right, what should leaders instruction leaders, special populations, which is special education leaders, culture leaders, operations, doing or impacting test prep. Because some people are like, oh, that's just the ELA, or that's a math, that has nothing to do with me. But this is a group process if you want to see strong results. And the schools that get strong results, this is a whole school thing. It's just not done in isolation. So this tool really gives a sense of what specific things folks should be doing to aid the continuous improvement at schools. You have principals, instruction leaders, all these different roles. And I think the big thing that I see around that everyone is doing here is celebrating, right? Everybody is celebrating the success. But this is here. We're running up on time, but this is here. This is in our resource. We'll share this out as well. Great resource to think about. What are specific leaders at my school doing daily, couple times a week, weekly, to ensure that students are getting solid results. And then the second one is test prep do's or don'ts. So what things should you do and should you not do in order to prepare students for the exam? I know this changes from school to school, but a couple things I do want to highlight. Some of the things you should not do. So one, don't stop instruction to do test prep with the exception of 2 to 3 opportunities to stamina pacing and or an extra practice test. So if you have a specific test prep block, that's great, but you don't want to stop core instruction just for test prep. I've done it before. Kids get tired of it and it actually has a more negative impact on results. Like if you want to pull kids out in a small group to support, but don't create a just stop all instruction just for test prep because that impacts teachers, that impacts students as well. Send a message that the test is the North Star because your North Star should be instruction overall throughout the school year. This is just something that we want to prep students to do well on. But if you're doing a solid job throughout the school year, this will be a walk in the park for your students. So the test prep isn't the end goal, but you do want to set students up and teachers up for success when they take the exam. um, Sending a message that the school is over when state testing happens. Some schools have 8 additional weeks, a month, etc. But we teach to the end to the last day. The last thing you want to do is after the test, students think that they're going to be able to watch movies all day. Can do, right? Our parents do not send their students to school to watch movies. Um, Create punitive or negative culture with students. If you don't pass this test, this is going to happen. A lot of pressure, but as the adults in the building, we have to be able to show patience, perseverance, and a calmness within ourselves as we're going through these high pressure times to not put unnecessary stress on students. And I think that's something that's tough for anyone, but it's very important when working with students. And then tutor test prep during non-math ELA blocks. Sometimes our social studies and history and science teachers feel like their time just gets snatched during test prep. I just recommend not doing that and prioritize everything because when you think about it, at least when they get to high school, all subjects are tested and important and connect to their future goals. So I would recommend, if it's possible, not just take away other core blocks in lieu of test prep. And with that, we are running up on time. So I'm going to jump into this last slide and a couple upcoming events. The first thing I want to do is just send a big shout out to Jill and I for our most recent Echelon school study in Nashville, Visitor Purpose Prep and Nashville Classical. Our goal was 16 folks. We had 16 folks show up. We actually had a waiting list. Really excited for our next school study in Boston. Great opportunity to learn from other schools, connect with other leaders, and visit a cool city. So yeah, we just had a fantastic time in Nashville. And also our
And
leadership retreat. Oh, good, Jim.
I jump in and shout out
Yeah,
and
for
thank
real.
you to the founders, Legra Newman and Charlie Friedman, founders of Purpose Prep and Nashville Classical, respectively, and then team members, Shauna Russell, Courtney Leaks, Brandon, who helped make our visit to Purpose so amazing, and then Abby Kay and Caitlin over at Nashville Classical, and also great to see Sarah Paquin, Molly and Laura, other folks that we've worked with in the past. So excited to reconnect with folks in Boston and know that the schools that we have coming up for you all are going to give you opportunities to be with great leaders as well. Turning it back to you. Sorry, had to shout out the
All
teams.
good. Most definitely. And then our leadership retreats in the winter. And of course, in summertime, if you're thinking of ways to build that cohesion as you go into the 24-25 school year, reach out with us. We have multiple openings coming up for that. And with that, I'm going to close us out. Thank you so much, everyone. Jill, thank you so much for doing this car side with us today. And really, really excited for our next school study. And I'm sorry, our next LinkedIn Live in January. And everyone have a safe and happy holidays and enjoy this winter break.